Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story, the U.S. and China holding competing drills in a hotly contested region, the South China Sea. What are the rising threats there? Deterring malign influence from China. Missouri is limiting the farmland foreign adversaries can buy. Why the state is implementing the new rule. U.S. tax cuts for buying electric vehicles getting harder and harder to come by. Washington just slashed the list of eligible rides from 17 to just 8. Find out why. And stray artillery shells hit a residential community, injuring 5 in southwestern China. Beijing fuming at Myanmar over the incident. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Washington is ramping up its show of force as tensions spike in Asia. China on Wednesday saying it's holding drills in the South China Sea. Beijing also released photos of its third aircraft carrier the same day. That's as the U.S. and the Philippines perform maritime exercises in the region. Worth noting, it's their second drill in less than 2 months. Over 20% of global trade passes through the South China Sea. Both China and the Philippines claim parts of the region, though China claims almost all of it. An international tribunal ruled China's claim invalid in 2016. Despite that, Beijing has ramped up aggression there. Chinese Coast Guard vessels were caught ramming into Philippine ships and spraying water cannons at Filipino boats. China's actions have Pacific countries on high alert. American forces have been performing more drills with allies in the Pacific, totaling as many as 37 last year. The vice commander of the Navy's 7th Fleet said it's all about deterring aggression. Zooming out, the U.S. has also been keeping an eye on the tensions escalating on the Korean peninsula. Washington and South Korea wrapped up a major joint drill Thursday. It lasted a week and was done near the North Korean border. Threats from the communist country is growing. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un threatened to annihilate the U.S. and South Korea if it's provoked. Just 2 weeks ago, Pyongyang launched a ballistic missile. Japan said the weapon was capable of striking anywhere in the U.S. The North also tested weapons designed to hit targets in the South and the Pacific. The U.S. has sent more military assets to the region, including a nuclear missile submarine, aircraft carriers, and large bombers. Missouri is limiting the farmland that China and other foreign adversaries can buy. This comes shortly after Florida Governor Ron DeSantis suggested he'd implement similar rules nationwide if he were to become president. NTD's Arian Pastar has more.
Missouri's Republican Governor Mike Parson signed an executive order on Tuesday, limiting the farmland foreign adversaries can buy.
We are banning all purchases of Missouri agriculture land within 10 miles of critical military facilities by adversary nations, including China.
The order also affects Russia, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, and Venezuela. But the governor added that the main focus of the order is on China. He says this aims to safeguard the military, prevent security threats to the state, and give Missourians a greater peace of mind. The governor also suggested he would extend the rule to include all land in the state if he could, but that his executive power is limited. The rule does not impact existing landowners or attempts to purchase land by friendly nations.
We're talking about Sweden. We're talking about Italy. You're talking about Germany. You're talking about the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan.
Arkansas and Florida have previously enacted similar measures to deter malign influence from China. Just last week, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis talked about how he would handle farmland in the U.S. if elected president.
Food security is national security. I don't want China buying farmland here. I view that as a national security asset that we have so that our country can remain free and independent.
In 2023, DeSantis limited China's ability to buy farmland as well as land near military sites and critical infrastructure in the state. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Robots with limbs and brains. The Chinese Communist Party is scaling up its plans to craft humanoid robots. They'll be used to help the country's manufacturing sector amid an aging population. But what are the global implications? And is the U.S. prepared for communist robots with AI-powered brains? We speak to Andrew Thornbrook, national security correspondent for the Epoch Times, for insight. Andrew Thornbrook, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Tiffany. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, you just recently did a deep dive titled, Is the U.S. Ready for China's Mass-Produced Humanoid Robots? Now, this is sounding quite sci-fi-y. Tell us about it.
So essentially, the regime in this new policy paper, right, in this guidance document trying to outline the next few years of how it's going to seize development of these robots, it envisions using these robots to replace humans for certain high stress, high demand and dangerous jobs. These could be things like working in factories, working in mines, perhaps working in space, things like this. And related to that, the regime is trying to invest in new education programs to essentially try to encourage education among its own people into high-tech jobs. So jobs in robotics, for instance, jobs in artificial intelligence, in quantum computing. So it's essentially trying to take the people that it does have, its shrinking population, and reskill them into really high-tech jobs that will sort of be very of a strategic advantage in the coming years, and then replace the manual labor as much as possible with machines, and particularly humanoid robots.
Now, zooming out, how does this impact the U.S., especially in terms of, say, national security?
So these robots, particularly any robots made with artificial intelligence, right, have to be designed with communist ideology in mind. And so as China builds these robots and then sends them out into the world and tries to export them to places like the United States, we're going to have to be aware of how they could be used subversively to essentially promote Chinese interests.
Now, what about the technology that is enabling this? Where did China get its hands on that?
Oh, yeah. So, of course, most of China's advanced technology that's used up to this point has been United States based. Whether or not it receives it directly from the United States or from other parties who bought it from the United States, just varies, of course. But ultimately, the types of semiconductors they use, even the manufacturing capabilities they use, were largely designed, at least, in the United States.
What does the U.S. need to do?
Yeah, so I think the real fear here is the risk of exponential technological growth based on who essentially develops the best technologies now, right? China is going to, over the course of successive generations of technology, develop an immense lead against the United States, right? So it's not just, do they get better robots now? It's what advantage in the next iteration will these robots give China? And then in that iteration, what advantages in different technologies will they be able to build off of that the United States won't have access to?
Andrew Thornbrook, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Special $7,500 EV tax credits just got harder to come by. The list of vehicles that qualify for them cut down to just 8 from a previous 17. The new rules takes aim at electric vehicles made with materials from China, as the West looks to cut supply chain reliance on the country. Models like the Nissan Leaf and Volkswagen ID.4 were culled from the list, while the Chevy Bolt, Ford's F-150 Lightning, and 3 different Teslas remain eligible. Washington said last month it would end the tax credits for vehicles with Chinese battery parts starting 2024. Cars made with Chinese nickel, lithium, or other key minerals are next on the chopping block, starting 2025. As the list shrinks one by one, it may still grow on the other end. A number of automakers are expected to submit more models for tax credit consideration in the future. A central question in Taiwan's upcoming elections: how should the island manage relations with China? One presidential candidate is suggesting a new approach: be patient. During a campaign interview, Ko Wen-je of the Third Force Taiwan People's Party likened the relationship between the two sides to a tumor.
30 years ago, when I was a surgeon, we found a tumor. We would try to remove it. But at this moment, no. We just try to live with it.
Ke notes the current economic challenges within China and says Beijing doesn't want war with Taiwan, but he adds there's still a risk. He explains that's because China is a dictatorship, making the possibility of war unpredictable. Recent polls place Ke in third, while the current vice president, William Lai, continues to lead. Lai is part of the ruling Democratic Progressive Party, which strongly supports Taiwan's de facto independence. According to a Reuters report on Wednesday, pressure from the Chinese military is expected to persist, regardless of who sits in the president's office. Beijing raised what it called solemn complaints with Myanmar on Thursday. This after stray artillery shells from Myanmar injured 5 people in a Chinese town. This CCTV footage captured the incident on Wednesday. The town in southwest China borders Myanmar's Shan state. Armed conflict between Myanmar's military and rebel groups has escalated there since late October. China has repeatedly called for ceasefire talks. In 2015, shelling from the volatile area also landed across the border in China, injuring 1. China is facing a major demographic crisis as dramatically fewer women want to have kids. From 2012 to 2022, China's number of newborns saw a nearly 6 million drop. The downhill trend hasn't hit its end yet and is actually getting worse. A Wall Street Journal article posted earlier this week shares a warning. China's birth rate is in free fall. The article suggests the causes behind the low birth rate are tied to political and social pressure, and Chinese women have seemingly had enough, as the communist regime demands and even harasses them to have more kids. On top of the financial pressure of raising children, would-be parents also face another problem: a growing crime rate targeting children in China. In recent years, cases of abducted children have surged. Some of the gruesome reports detail how the children's remains are recovered with organs missing, suggesting black market forced organ harvesting. Data from the country's National Bureau of Statistics shows China's birth rate started dropping ever since the ruling body, the Chinese Communist Party, took power. The number of babies being born now is lower than during the post-World War II era, even though that time marked China's worst economic depression in the 60s. The head of the Chinese Communist regime is eager to solve its aging population issue, calling on the National Women's Federation to, quote, solve risks in the women's field. Chinese women have yet to respond positively. India has already surpassed China and become the most populous country in the world as of last April. Projections suggest China's population could drop around 500 million by the year 2100. Next, we'd like to take a moment to share some of your thoughts on our last show. Commenting on our report about Chinese automaker BYD outselling Tesla, with one expert attributing BYD's success to factors like low cost, low prices, and backing from the Chinese Communist Party. But some keen-eyed viewers pointed out more details. First, investor Warren Buffett has sold over $25 million worth of shares in BYD in October. In the first quarter of 2022, 640 electric vehicles reportedly caught fire in China, averaging 7 EVs catching fire per day. And since last year, Tesla vehicles have been barred around specific locations in China. Those factors appear to be behind BYD's status as the new best-selling EV brand. Now, don't forget to tell us what you think of today's show. Thanks for watching. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for more than 2 years. If you'd like to support us, consider donating. Find us at donorbox.org/China-in-focus. Or subscribe to our partner platform, Epic TV, where you can watch our full episodes. Here's what to look out for in our second half. Japan's prime minister calling for more rescue efforts in the wake of a major earthquake, while a Chinese TV anchor's speech puts him in the spotlight. An eye surgery allegedly ending in death. That scandal turning out to be just the tip of the iceberg inside China's largest eye health hospital group. And a growing trend of cyber kidnapping unfolding in China and the U.S. The latest victim, a Chinese exchange student. What's behind the plot? More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow.